Welcome to the Trinitarian Church podcast. This is Adam, and joining me today are Alec and Jason. Say hey.
Hello.
And today we're on the recap. We're going to recap an episode of Our Daily Bread podcast. This one's from just a few days ago, and it's from June 8th, and the topic is generosity and joy. In that podcast, the scriptures that they go over are 1 Chronicles 29, 1 through 9, and talk about generosity and the feeling that accompanies it most of the time. Guys, what are your thoughts?
So what they really go into here, the whole podcast is 5 minutes, and we're probably going to go longer than that. So recap is a generous word. I don't know. Maybe it's not a recap. It's more of a...
We're a review.
It's a review. It's a jumping off point. I don't know. We're just going to talk about it because it was good. So what they go into with the lovely Australian, maybe New Zealand accent, they say, social science teaches us, let's stop thinking about giving as a moral obligation and start thinking of it as a source of pleasure. And they question if that's going to direct our giving and our reason for giving to things that are sort of exciting or glamorous. Missions would be one of those things where you see a lot of fruit come from that, or adopting a child where you get pictures in the mail and all this stuff. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that's just as critical. And if we do look at it more of like a personal satisfaction thing rather than more of a moral obligation where we're sort of required by God to help those around us, does that mean we're going to start giving to things that are sort of exciting, and that our motivation really becomes self-serving? And I guess on that, do we then give at all? If it doesn't make us feel as good as we hoped, because it makes you feel good, but then you say, well, what else could I have done with that money? I think that's kind of, well, it is true that giving makes you feel good. What does that mean for like how and why we give as Christians? And he quotes from Chronicles in this, Chronicles 29, 1 through 5, where the people respond generously to giving to the temple, and how that is about fulfilling a need that God has put before the people, rather than necessarily giving to something that they personally just thought was a nice idea or made them feel warm fuzzies. And what does that mean for us? So, Alec, I'll let you jump in here. I know you've got some experience in sort of the charitable giving sectors of industry or the world.
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I have worked at Compassion International, the child sponsorship organization, and then I currently work at Save the Storks, which is a nonpartisan pro-life organization. And it's interesting with certain people who want to give to the organization, who really have a sense of what the ministry is doing. We're helping children in poverty, or we're helping these moms and saving babies, and they really like that and want to support that. But this is a minority of people, but you'll occasionally get people saying, I don't want any of my donation to go towards administration. I want it all to go to the mission. And one, that's just not reasonable. You've got to have people who are that your bean counter folks. You got to have those folks who are making sure that all your numbers add up, and making sure that everyone in the office is taken care of. You got your HR departments, and someone's got to keep the lights on and the heat on in the building, and those aren't glamorous. Those aren't glamorous sorts of things. I don't think those are going to be the sources of pleasure that the psychologist that he references talks about, but they really are true needs that need to be taken care of. And a couple other examples I want to give with that, especially as Christians, this is one of the areas that I think can really impact our witness. I was a server at a restaurant for about 3 years, and I can tell you that most servers do not want to work Sunday lunch because they know that all the church people are getting out of church, and they're going to come to lunch, and they're not going to tip well. That is the expectation from servers. That those Christians, after they get out of church, maybe they gave all their money to the offering plate, and they're going to come here And one, they're not going to be nice, and two, they're not going to tip well. And that hurts our witness. That really, really does. And that needs to be a place that it is not glamorous necessarily to tip your server well. No one else is going to know. You know, you're going to write the number on the receipt, hand it to them, and that's it. But man, that is such a need. And when I was a server and I got good tips, that just made my day from people. And we have the opportunity to do that, to really bless people as believers, to make a good witness, and not a bad one. And so just want to encourage y'all, you know, we're recording on a Sunday. We've probably had our lunch already, but, you know, anyone who listens to this in the future, if you're going out to lunch or dinner on a Sunday after church and people kind of know because you maybe still have your church clothes on when you go eat, like that's an opportunity to be generous and maybe think of the joy for other people that you're causing with your generosity and something like that in tipping. And try to find those places that maybe aren't the glamorous things that we want to give to. You know, people were donating their gold and silver and precious jewels to the temple. It's like someone had to make candles. Is that nearly as exciting as the literal shiny stuff? No, but someone had to constantly make candles, and like those people, you know, they need support too. Those are places that we can give and be generous, and for the sake of worshiping the Lord, no less.
Amen. Let me second that because when I worked in a restaurant, on Sundays we had a church crowd that would literally tip. Like, we're talking 10 people at a table and order big meals and like 2 or 3 tables, and their tips were gospel tracts, which, yes, there is nothing that could be given that is better than the good news of Jesus Christ. But these are people that are working to earn a living and need a tip. Yeah, it's amen. I'm totally agreeing with you. But yeah, overall, Jason, did you have any other thoughts about generosity and the feeling that accompanies it? And are we searching for the feeling, or are we doing it and the feeling is secondary? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was actually going to ask you guys if you ever got gospel tracts instead of tips, and I think that'd be so annoying. So anyway, if you're thinking about doing that, don't do it. You can leave it with
you can leave it with a very generous tip.
There you go.
It reminds me of a quote, you know, where they're doing ministry, and you know, somebody said, well, you know, hungry people are more likely to accept the good news than, you know, people who are starving. And so we should focus on feeding and taking care of people's needs. And, you know, somebody else said, well, why don't we just feed them because they're hungry? Like, why don't we just help people because this is something God commands us to do without necessarily expecting that we have to also communicate a particular message. And it's like, not that we shouldn't, like, we should, but if your focus is just on, well, unless I'm getting the thing I'm trying to do through to you, then I'm not interested in your actual needs. I'm interested in getting you in a position where I can market to you. And it's like, you might be marketing the truth of God. It might be the best thing in the world to market, but unless you're actually genuinely trying to help people, and that's right. The tipping thing, that's a huge thing for me. Like, I almost never go out to eat because life and inflation and kids. But when I do, I'm like, you better leave a decent tip for somebody. Like, I would go so far as to say you better leave a good tip. Like, you know, seriously, people, they work hard. But that aside, it's just, it's one of those things where I think when we focus on giving because it makes us feel good, we end up maybe losing sight of the fact that there's people who genuinely are in a lot worse shape than we are. And the real goal here is that God is asking us to help each other out. And, you know, God cares about people actually not just getting by, but hopefully flourishing. And the more that we can be part of a world that is flourishing and not one where, you know, we give because it makes us feel good. Like, you know, you hear about billionaires giving huge sums of money. It's like, yeah, but that's like me giving $5. Like, I can give $5. It makes me feel good, but, you know, it doesn't necessarily make a huge impact. I mean, it might, depending on the person, right? But it's like, what are your reasons for doing this? And while it's wonderful that we feel good when we give, like, let's focus on the real reason is this is obedience to God and what Christ teaches us in terms of living with each other and loving people. And I thought that was a nice reminder from this short podcast, much shorter than ours.
Well, on that note, thank you guys, and thank you all for joining us on the Trinitarian Church podcast. Y'all have a great day.
See ya.